Well, good afternoon, everyone. I make that about 2 minutes past two, so we will start going. Though there are still some people who are joining us. It is a huge pleasure to welcome all 288 of you and counting to this webinar. My name is Jack Butterworth. I am the head of the Research and Grants Department at the National Archives. I'm a white male in my mid-30s with brown hair and brown eyes. I'm wearing a blue shirt. And I'm here with my colleagues from our Research and Grants Department to present to you this afternoon about Archives Revealed. What we are going to do this afternoon is, first of all, for those of you who might be new to the scheme, we are going to give a brief introduction to what Archives Revealed is and how you can hopefully benefit from it. I'm then going to outline a few headline points for the many of you on the call who I'm sure will be familiar with Archives Revealed, explaining a little bit about what is the same as it always was and what has changed as a result of our new partnership with the National Lottery Heritage Fund. I'm then going to pass over to my colleague James, our head of archive sector funding, who's going to explain a little bit in more detail about each of the three grant schemes before covering some key hints and tips for anybody who is interested in applying for the scheme and wants to make an application. And then we've got a lot of time at the end for a question and answer session. We might not need all of it, but we will leave a huge amount of time to answer your questions about the scheme, about the grants that we have available, about what we're looking for, and just anything else that you might have that would help you prepare for an application. So hopefully that all sounds good. Just to let you know, this webinar will be recorded, so we will put this all up on YouTube afterwards. So it does mean that if you put anything in the chat or in the Q&A, then your question may be read out and may be available on YouTube. But I think it's just going to be James, myself, and my colleague Holly, who is managing the question and answer session, speaking this afternoon. So without much further ado, let's get into it a little bit. So I can't imagine there are many people on the call who are unfamiliar with the archive sector, but for anyone who is, we, the National Archives, are responsible for sector leadership of archives in England and are part of a vibrant and thriving and massive archive sector of, we think, about 2,500 archives across the UK in public sector institutions, in universities, in cultural institutions, in charities, in businesses, in private homes. There are many, many archives up and down the land, and they don't have that many things in common. They come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes, but what they all share is our collections that are about everyone, that tell stories of people in the UK and also globally. And we at the National Archives and we as part of the Archives Revealed funding partnership are interested in all of those stories, are interested in those collections, and we're interested in making that heritage accessible to as many people as possible. And so about, I think it was 17 or 18 years ago, a grant program was instituted by our friends at the Pilgrim Trust with the Wolfson Foundation and with us at the National Archives to provide funding to make those incredible collections more accessible to people wherever they may be found in the UK. And for the past 17 years or so, we have been providing funding to make sure that archival collections are scoped if they're potentially of public interest, and also particularly that they are catalogued. And I'm sure many of you will be familiar with cataloguing, but it's a really, really important process of understanding and sorting and describing an archival collection so that it's accessible. One of our friends at the Pilgrim Trust once called an archive without a catalogue being like a room without a door. And that's a philosophy that we very much take forward with this programme. And we want to see collections in the UK and archives being as accessible as they possibly can be. And we have provided funding for that for a long time. But there are some things that are new. And as many of you will have heard at our launch announcement in July, we have been hugely delighted to welcome the National Lottery Heritage Fund to the partnership that funds Archives Revealed, and we are now a foursome of funding organisations, which you can see on the right-hand side. And I just want to stop for a moment and pay thanks to all of the colleagues at all four of those organisations, and also to all of the National Lottery players who have enabled this funding investment in the archive sector. We hope it will be absolutely transformational, and we have a very deep gratitude to everybody who has made it happen. So what has happened? It's become a £6 million 3-year partnership. We are going to distribute at least 158 grants between now and March 2027, and over 85% of the partnership's funding, so over £5.1 million, will go directly to you in the form of investment into archives across the UK. And a lot of things will stay the same, and I'm going to talk a little bit about those on my next slide. But we've also wanted to do something different now that we've had that much larger investment. And our vision is to turn Archives Revealed, or rather to build on the base of what everything that Archives Revealed has been thus far, build on the base of funding for cataloguing, build on the base of impact and advocacy that the programme has had in place for such a long time, to deliver something that really is a cross-cutting programme of change for the archive sector as a whole. So on top of our funding investments, we are also going to be funding new public engagement initiatives. We are going to be providing training. We are going to be piloting new forms of grant making with larger grants. We are going to do much deeper evaluation and data gathering. We are going to do hopefully much more engaging and celebratory communications and advocacy on behalf of archives. We really want this to be a programme that does an awful lot for the sector in an awful lot of different ways. And I'm just going to spend a few minutes explaining what that might look like. So what's the same for those of you who are familiar with Archives Revealed already? The answer is quite a lot. So we will continue to fund scoping grants of up to £3,000. I think we have funding for 75 of them. We will continue to fund cataloguing grants of up to £50,000. I think we have funding for 75 of those as well. And those will stay very much within the tramlines with which you might be familiar. We are interested in first of all, in scoping archive collections that may be of public benefit, maybe of public value, and secondarily in providing funding so that those collections can be made accessible, so that they can be made relevant, so that they can be described for access by the public, by researchers, and so on. We will continue to welcome applications from all 4 home nations of the UK. There is absolutely no sense that this is only for England or anything like that. Our leadership role only obtains in England, but we are providing this funding across the UK. And we're very, very keen that we hear from applicant organisations in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland in particular. We will continue to be as flexible and accessible as possible in our funding. This is a philosophy which we have taken forward for a number of years now. We believe very insistently that we shouldn't create too many barriers to our funding, and we know that many of you are working in resource-constrained contexts. We know that many of you are working not necessarily with professional fundraisers, and so we are trying to create a funding program that really judges the quality of the project and the quality of the archive service, and that does not depend upon access to huge amounts of fundraising expertise. We want this to work for every archive in the sector, big or small. And as part of that commitment to sector development and support, we will also continue to provide very comprehensive support to everyone who applies for us, everyone who receives money from us. We have a wider programme team that's going to be put in place here at the National Archives, and if you need any kind of support from us or any kind of question that you need to ask us, please do just get in touch. Finally, we will maintain those 6 aims that you can see at the bottom. We've always had very broad and very cross-cutting aims, I think, looking for significant archival collections, looking to uphold standards, looking to promote diversity, inclusion, and particularly to promote links between archives and their audiences, to promote engagement, to promote participation in heritage, and to get a wider range of people involved in heritage. All of those things will remain true within the slightly expanded structure which we now have, though we are enabled by the wonderful investment from the Heritage Fund to do some slightly different things with them. And these are what they are. So this is what is going to be different about Archives Revealed from those of you that may be familiar with it from the past. First of all, there's more investment available. So we will have 75 cataloguing and scoping grants available over the course of the programme. That's in the next 2.5 years. And consequently, we're going to be opening the funding for cataloguing grants twice per year. We'll continue opening the funding for scoping grants 4 times a year. And so what this means is that, unlike in the past, where if you missed a round or if you didn't get funding in a particular round, there might be a 12-month wait to reapply. This time around, your chance will come around again much sooner. And in particular, that means that in the coming weeks, if you miss the first deadlines that we have in September and October, you don't need to worry too much, because we'll be opening again for applications, I think, in January. So there won't be too long to wait. Secondly, we have moved from a 2-stage application to single-stage applications throughout the programme. Our intention in doing this has been to reduce the amount of time between you submitting your application and you hearing whether or not you've got funding. There will still be a few months wait while we go through the evaluation assessment processes and we hear from our wonderful expert panel, but we want this money to get to you as quickly as possible, and we've heard quite often that you wanted that to happen in a single stage application. So there will be no more 2-stage applications at any stage in the programme. A third change relates particularly to the scoping grants, those of you that are familiar with them. The change here is that in the past, we have paid the consultants that would conduct the scoping report directly, but now we are going to pay you, and you should pay the consultant directly. That is a slight shift in process for those familiar, but one that's quite important. So do bear in mind that we will be paying these funds to you, to the applicant organisations, if you apply for a scoping grant. Here's the really exciting bit. So here are all the new things that we get to layer on top of Archives Revealed. First of all, we have funding for, I think, 8 consortium grants. And what these are grants of up to £150,000 for groups of archives to work together on a common project, a common question, a common area, a common thematic focus. We want to see some really big, impactful projects from our consortium grants, and James is going to talk about those in more detail in a few minutes' time. Next, we will have, on top of our grant making, a program to be launched next year of training and development and skills building and mentoring and cohort working and events and all sorts of things. So we will, alongside Archives Revealed, be offering all sorts of training and networking opportunities that have not been part of the program previously. Those are going to be most of all for our grantees and applicants, but we hope that we can also deliver benefit through that program to the wider sector. And we've just appointed a wonderful sector development manager who is going to help curate that program of training with us. We're very, very excited to be launching that in next calendar year. We have, as mentioned, a wider program team, and we'll also be procuring a new evaluation partner. So we want to collect a lot more evidence and data from this program than we have in the past. We've been really good at giving you the money in the past, but we've sometimes been not quite as good at hearing what became of it, at hearing what stories you were able to unlock, at hearing what impact you were able to deliver for your audiences. We have a lot of money put aside now for evidence building, for evaluation, for data gathering, for analysis, and we will very much be asking all of our grantees to participate in that process of learning and evaluation, most of all so that we can do the last thing on this slide, which is enable more communications and advocacy. I was at the ARA conference last week when Alistair from the Heritage Fund spoke so well about advocacy for the whole sector, and that's something that we've really taken to heart in this new partnership. And we want to use the evidence base that we have built to be better advocates for you on behalf of the whole sector, and hopefully one day deliver many more interventions of the scale and ambition of the new Archives Revealed. And lastly, the final big change, which I just want to linger on for a couple of minutes, is that we are going to have a much greater focus on audiences, on users, on communities who might be engaged with archives, whether they're communities who you're working with at the moment or communities who you might one day work with or would like to work with. We are much more interested than perhaps we have been able to be in the past in who the audiences of your projects are. And this has a few practical changes that you need to know about in how we look at grant applications. First of all, we're going to be asking scoping grant applicants to have a think about who the eventual audiences for their collection might be as part of their application. And we're going to be asking scoping grant consultants to help a little bit with early ideas of how those audiences might be engaged around a collection that's been scoped. When we get to the larger schemes, the Cataloguing Consortium Grants, we are going to ask for much more detailed plans about what public engagement, audience facing and participatory activity will look like. So those things are going to be weighted more significantly in our assessment. We are asking more questions about them than we have in the past. We're asking more detailed questions about exactly what you plan to do with the collection once it's been catalogued, exactly how you plan to engage the communities that might be represented in the collection or might be interested in it, how you might encourage a wider range of people to participate in the work of your archive service and participate in heritage more generally. And as part of that, we're going to ask that 20% of every grant be spent on that engagement and participatory work. That is a minimum, not a maximum. You can spend much more than that should you wish, and we're really delighted to hear about that. But in every single project, we are looking for creative, ambitious ideas. We're not just wanting archive services to kind of stay within their four walls. We're actually really keen on archives using catalogue collections to work with communities, to encourage people to participate in heritage in whatever form. And we want to support whatever creative, ambitious ideas you have for driving those new connections with your own communities. And as part of that drive, we're going to be providing an awful lot more support from the National Archives, also working with our partners at the Heritage Fund and elsewhere to support your ideas, to build skills, to encourage people of new ways of thinking about how that public engagement might work. So that's enough from me. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague, James Hodgson, who is going to give you a more detailed breakdown of what happens in each grant scheme. I'll be back for the Q&A. Thank you very much, and over to you, James.
Thanks, Jack. As Jack mentions, my name's James. I am the head of archive sector funding at the National Archives, which means that I look after the grants that we offer, of which Archives Revealed is the largest, the most substantial grant program we do. To start with a little bit about our motivations behind Archives Revealed, why are we doing Archives Revealed? We're doing Archives Revealed because we know that archives are important and that they matter. We know and we've seen that archives can change people's lives for the better. Archives Revealed is a significant investment, and it is designed to help you become the best you can be, giving you the opportunities to show how your archives and how your collections can be shared with the public in an inclusive, educating and inspiring way throughout the United Kingdom. With the programme, we are looking for you and your organisations to apply for your collections that you consider of significance, the most significant collections in your collections, which will give people the opportunity to engage with histories that are otherwise left unexplored. The whole purpose or the whole motivation of Archives Revealed comes from understanding the large cataloguing backlog in the sector and how without the act of cataloguing, those collections are left unexplored, hidden and locked away from people. You can't engage with a collection without knowing what's in a collection. I have the wonderful job of speaking with archives and archive services every day. And I know that you all are passionate, you're enthusiastic, you care about your collections, you care about your archives, and you care about the people that you work with. This program is an opportunity for you to show the best of what you can do and what your Heritage Service has to offer, as well as Jack mentioned, giving us the opportunity to celebrate archives as custodians of our shared history. To speak a little about the grants programs that we're offering, if we could skip to the next slide, please. Before you apply for our grants, the first thing you need to do is check that you're eligible and understand what we're offering. The Archives Revealed website has been relaunched or redesigned, and there is a link at the top there, which we'll share in the chat, to the new portal. Please do have a look at our website. There is extensive guidance on the website about eligibility criteria, the timetables for granting, as well as very detailed guidance on what we're looking for from your applications. It includes quite lengthy guidance around the assessment process and the criteria we're asking you to apply with. And you're also able to look at the application forms themselves from the website, so you can understand and see what questions we are asking. Much as Jack's mentioned earlier, we are doing our best to keep everything accessible and understandable by applicants. So hopefully you'll see that when we're asking questions in the application forms, they are very, very directly linked to the criteria. So if we're asking you to explore and explain the significance of your question, we will ask a question that says, can you explain the significance of your collection? We won't try and hide things. We won't try and make things obscure for you. So one of the things to think about before you apply is, if you want to, is this funding program appropriate for you? Is it the right time for you to apply? You don't need to chase the funding. As Jack mentioned, this will be a 3-year program of grant making. And so if you don't apply for the first round, you can apply for the second round or the third round or the fourth round. As you're doing it, what you need to do is have a think, is this program appropriate for me at the moment? If not, what would we need to do to prepare? What collections should we consider? So you might want to have a look through your collections. How can we access the support that we need to do our best in the application and the project delivery? And what form of public engagement is appropriate for us, our service, and our collection? One of the best things you can do when you're making a grant application is for it to fit in with your organisation. It's a very cheesy question, but where do we want to be in 5 years' time? Have a think about how the Archives Revealed grants will get you to where you want to be in 5 years' time. How does it help you realise your vision for the future? Does it align with your organisation's strategic plans? And do you currently have the infrastructure in place to deliver a good grant? If not, as mentioned, have a think about what you need to do to prepare. To repeat, the grants are going to run regularly. If you miss the first round, don't worry, there'll be plenty more opportunities throughout the grant programme to apply again. Scoping grants running 4 times a year and Cataloguing Consortium Grants running twice a year. We can move forward to the next slide, please. So yeah, the first thing to check before you apply for a fund is, are you eligible to apply? As Jack mentioned, we want this scheme to be accessible. We want it to be as inclusive as possible, and we want it to really meet the needs of the archive sector and for archive collections. But because it is a grant and it's a fund, we do have some very broad, I would say, eligibility criteria. These are the basics. Please do look at each grant specifically on our website for the full eligibility criteria, but this in general covers covers most of the areas. So you need to apply Archives Revealed funds archival projects. Therefore, you need to apply for a project or for a grant focused on an archive collection. An archive collection is one that holds unique records, and we would be looking for those records to be your significant collections, those that have a local, national, or international importance that you are able to articulate and that our panel can understand and appreciate. The projects need to be for collections held in the United Kingdom, so that's England, Wales, Scotland, or Northern Ireland. And your organisation also needs to be based in the United Kingdom or have a head office within the United Kingdom. We want the grants and the collections to be accessible for the public for research and enjoyment. And therefore, one of our criteria is that you must make your collection accessible to people in the UK for at least 10 years following completion of the grant. Because we believe in the professional standards of archiving, and that through this granting we want to encourage professional standards, we also want to ensure that projects are delivered the best way possible, and that archives or the archivists employed by the projects are guided and supported by the organizations employing them. You should work with a qualified archivist or a heritage professional with similar experience, both in preparing the application and in your proposal for how you'll manage the project, thereby ensuring robust professional standards in the project delivery. We do not make big distinctions between the types of collections. They can be physical collections, they can be digital collections, or they can be mixed collections. They can also be owned or deposited collections, but with that, you need to ensure that you are meeting the other eligibility requirements. For example, if you have a deposited collection, you will need a letter from the depositor or evidence in the deposit agreement that you are able to provide that 10-year public access following the completion of a grant. And finally, all grantees will be expected to report on their grant and to contribute to the various knowledge sharing activities we mentioned earlier. This might be in working groups, it might be through contributing to case studies or impact seminars, in blogs or sharing some highlights of your collection as you've been cataloging it. If we can move on to the next slide, I will start talking about the different grants that we offer. Grant. We have run it for quite a few years now, but for those of you who aren't, our scoping grants provide funding for an independent consultant to come to your organisation and to assess your collection. From that assessment, they will write a strategic report for you to use. Now, these reports are not a substitute for cataloguing. You won't get an item-by-item listing or a catalogue of your collection, but they are a great first step in understanding your collection and preparing it and yourself for the future. We are looking for collections that are significant, those that are able to tell a story that is important. But when we talk about significance, we are talking about what stories your collection can tell and why is that story important. They can be important, certainly internationally important. They could be nationally important, but they can also be very locally important. Might tell the stories of specific communities, specific groups of people, specific movements, or have specific themes that mean that they are an important collection that deserves some time, some care, and some investment in. Really, we're asking you, as mentioned before, you are passionate. I know you care about your collections, and what we're trying to do here is ask you to explain to us why you believe that collection is important, why you care about it, and why you believe others will also feel similar. The scoping report is helpful for planning the next steps in your collection management and conservation, as well as to prioritize activities with that collection in the future. So how you're going to develop your collection in the future. It can give guidance around access and engagement opportunities for the collections. And perhaps most importantly, it can act as an advocacy document, allowing you to speak about your collection with an independent voice, supporting your views, your beliefs. And you can use that for advocating both internally to your organization, as well as externally, including fundraising opportunities. We have seen some scoping grants move on to cataloguing grants, for example, which I will speak about in a few minutes. But we have also seen scoping and cataloguing grants obtain funding for their collections from various other funders, including our partners who are funding Archives Revealed. So if you would like to apply for a scoping grant, or if you might be interested, there are 3 areas that might be something to think about before applying. You might be interested in applying if you have a collection that you believe has the potential to be a public benefit. You might be interested in applying if you are unsure at the moment how best to target your resources, your time, your efforts, your finances, etc., to best realize the impacts of your collection. And you might be interested in applying if you're able to meet our earlier criteria around public access to the collection in the future. And that can be either directly that you open your service to sharing and showing that collection, but it might also be in collaboration with other archive services or heritage organizations through which people are able to access the collection that's been scoped. If we can skip to the next slide. So to talk a little bit more about scoping grants and what you actually get from the grant. Scoping grants are for £3,000, and this usually covers about 6 days of a consultant's time, as well as reimbursable expenses such as transport or accommodation if they need to spend longer time or travel further to work with your collections. If you don't spend, or if the consultant doesn't spend that whole £3,000, funds will need to be returned to the Archives Revealed programme. We will usually do a reconciliation at the end of the grant to determine the balance of funding. Before you start the project or before the consultant comes to visit you, we will send through some guidance to ensure that your collection is ready for assessment. That is often as simple as making sure there's space for the consultant to have a look at it, making sure that it's all brought to the same place. If it's stored in unsafe environments, it is about getting it out of there so that when the consultant comes, they're best able to use their time with you. We hold a database, the Archives Revealed team hold a database of independent heritage and archive consultants, and we can connect you with them as you need. If you would like to use one of our independent consultants, that's wonderful. On occasion, some grantees have preferred to use their own consultants that they've known or worked with for some time. That's generally okay, but we do ask that simply for our due diligence that you ask us first, and then subject to approval, you're able to work with your own consultant. The general scope of work, but again, this comes very much down to kind of discussions with your consultant, is that a consultant will spend 3 days with a collection and 3 days on report writing. As mentioned, you'll have the opportunity to discuss with them prior to starting the project about your own needs and hopes from the report. It might be that you feel very confident, for example, around the collections care, but you are more interested in, say, the public engagement or the advocacy pieces, and you can ask the consultant to focus more on them. Or vice versa, you might be very happy with the public engagement aspirations and ask a consultant to focus more around conservation. We will ask you 3 criteria when you apply for the fund. They are significance, which, as I mentioned, is about the story. What story can your collection tell? We do have some really good guidance on our website about this, and I think we've got about 8 different prompts for thought around significance. So things like, what's the provenance of the collection? What's its completeness or condition of the collection? Who are the existing or the potential audience for the collection? So again, I would really recommend going to our website, having a read through the criteria and the guidance for applying for our funding. The next criteria we're looking for is about the need for the scoping report, about what do you believe will change really with the scoping report. What is the current circumstance of the collection? What do you think will happen with the scoping report having been conducted? And what are some of the outcomes of the scoping report? Do you think it will be a good advocacy tool for it? Are you looking to redefine its collection care or work on some policies around that? Really, we want to hear from you about what will change after you have the scoping report and why do you need to do it now. And then the last criteria is about the impact of the grant. Here's the opportunity to show your understanding of the existing audiences that the collection has, but also its future. Who are the potential audiences and what are the opportunities for future engagement with the collection that has been scoped? And if we go to the next slide. I will now talk to you about cataloguing grants, and just to re-emphasize, because I know I am talking an awful lot, this whole presentation will be available online and recorded so that you can watch it at a later date. So yeah. So to talk a bit about cataloguing grants, cataloguing grants will offer up to £50,000 for the cataloguing of significant archive collections, which must be allocated, of which 20% must be allocated to public engagement activities. Cataloguing itself is the process of writing detailed descriptions for records that you manage and how they relate to each other. Its purpose is to allow the records to be searched for and to be interacted with. We have 4 aims of the cataloguing grant, and they are to increase access to previously unavailable archival materials, to increase engagement with archive collections by a wider audience, to enable deeper use of archive materials to further the understanding of collections, as well as to increase confidence and skills of archivists to enable them to successfully secure income to fund archive developments. If we can go to the next slide, please. So about the grants themselves, cataloguing grants usually last up to 2 years from the date of award. They usually have been used to, or the bulk of the funding usually has been used to pay for a trained archivist to come and work with the collections to catalogue it. As mentioned, it now includes funding for public engagement, and any unspent funds or any of the remainder of the grant can be used for complementary activities such as storage or conservation materials, but these should really be the smallest proportion of the grant, the largest portion being on salaries on the professionals working to catalogue the grants, followed by the public engagements aspect. When budgeting for an archivist, we do ask that you budget in accord or in line with the salary recommendations from the Archives and Records Association's pay working group. The link is available there, and we can pop that in the chat. Sometimes organizations have their own salary bandings that can conflict or be a bit different from this. If that's the case, please do just get in contact with us and discuss that in advance of applying. As Jack mentioned, it is now a single stage application process and will be running twice a year. Awards will be made by an expert or an independent expert panel, and we are looking to start recruiting for this panel over the next coming weeks. So do stay tuned to our website and the other communications channels we use to keep an eye out for that. And the 5 assessed criteria we'll be looking for these grants are about the significance of the grant, and that will be 30% of the weighting, the needs and priority for cataloguing of the collection, which will be 10% of the weighting, the way in which you propose cataloguing the collection and how that will lead to improvements of access, another 10%. Understanding about the audiences, the engagement and the impact of the grant, which will be 30%. And here is the opportunity to talk about that dedicated funding for public engagement. And then finally, we'll be looking at the feasibility and the approach to project management and staffing on your project, which will be the last 20% of the marks. So moving forward onto the next slide, to talk a little bit about the new consortium grants. Consortium grants will be offering funding of up to £150,000 for groups of archives and heritage organisations to collaborate on projects for the cataloguing of archive collections, as well as including up to 20% of the grant's value allocated to public engagement activities to encourage the UK public's enjoyment and participation in archives, heritage and our shared history. The aims of the fund are similarly to the cataloguing grants to increase access to previously unavailable archival material, to empower the archive sector to address larger scale shared challenges, to develop existing relationships and create new opportunities for collaboration in the sector, to increase engagement with archive collections by a wider audience, to enable deeper use of archive materials to further understanding of collections, and to increase the confidence and skills of archivists to enable them to sustainably build resilience and capacity. So if you feel like you have a project that will do all of the above, do parts of the above, we'd be delighted to hear from you. If we can skip forward a slide. So much like the cataloguing grants, our consortium projects can last for up to 2 years from the date of award. We do anticipate it will be a very competitive fund. It is the first time we've run it. Generally, our Archives Revealed funding is amongst the more competitive of the grants that we offer. However, with the increased funding, hopefully that will be balanced out slightly, particularly in the catalogue and the scoping grants. For our consortium grants, we really want to hear from you. We know it's a strong sector. We know it's an inspired sector, and we're looking for your ideas. What's the challenge that you've seen that you feel with a little investment, working together, that we can overcome and we can improve in the future? So your projects are up to you to define, but they've got to have a purpose. We anticipate that consortiums might want to look at questions around thematic areas of your collection. So that might be transport archives, religious archives, or many of the various themes that archives have. They might be geographic, they might be about priority places, or they might be about regions and telling the story of a region, or they might strive to answer questions around practice for the whole of the sector. When you're applying, not all members of the consortium need to hold an archive collection themselves, although the collection must be the focus of your application. To explain that, it's because we believe that in the consortium grants, there may be spaces for technical and other expert involvement in projects that won't necessarily come from people that won't necessarily need to have collections themselves, but be contributing to the collections at the heart of the project. In order to apply, each consortium must nominate a lead partner who will be the partner who is contracted, and because they are the partner contracted, they will ultimately hold the responsibility for reporting and managing the project delivery. As mentioned, the applications will be assessed by an independent panel. We will be recruiting for this over the coming weeks. And the 6 criteria we're looking for in consortium grant applications are partnership working, how will you work together, the significance of the collection, its needs and priority for cataloguing, the cataloguing approach and how that will improve access, audiences' engagement and impact, and finally, the feasibility and project management and staffing of the projects. If we can skip forward a slide. So we have some upcoming deadlines. Everything is now open. It is open from the 2nd of September today, so you can click and apply from now. To apply for scoping grants, we have a deadline at the end of the month on the 30th of September, and then a reopening later. We're reopening for a 14th of February deadline next year for the next round of scoping grants. Our cataloguing grants, again, open now. Both our cataloguing and consortium grants are open for the first round of funding, which closes on the 25th of October. The second round of funding will close on the 4th of April next year. And then finally, as mentioned again, we are going to be launching a call for individuals to join our expert panel for the cataloguing and consortium grants, which will give you the opportunity to contribute your expertise to a large and hopefully exciting program. I've now got 10 hints and tips, which I will go quickly through, and then we will move over for some time for questions and answers. As mentioned, please do read and understand the guidance. Our website is detailed, it is large, it is hopefully as helpful as it can be. It's got a lot of prompts and suggestions for each assessment criteria. have it open while you're writing your answers, check with it, and talk through with colleagues about your answers. Think about why you're applying. Think about what the future looks like if you have an archives grant. Think about what it would be like if it were to start soon, and ask yourself, is now the right time? If it's not, that's absolutely fine. There are many rounds of funding coming up. If you want to take, or if you need to take some time to prepare, please do take it. It's much better to put in a good proposal that you are happy with than to rush things. As mentioned, I speak to inspired, passionate people every day, and I am very lucky to have that role. I know you can develop a compelling proposal. You are the best person to understand your collections, the audiences for it, and what will work best for you. Make sure you explain to us why, and don't assume any knowledge. Explain it to us like we don't know anything. I think is the best way. Really, the more you make it clear, the better we'll be able to understand. Work with and consult with others. Tell people at your organization, your community, and anyone else that you think can contribute to the project, get their ideas, and really practically, really simply, ask people to have a proofread of your application. I know for myself, I can get really into what I've written and it makes sense to me, but not always everyone else. So if you can ask people to have a proofread, that's great. On our website, we've got a list of our past grantees. We've also got many case studies. Have a look at those, see if they will inspire you, see if you potentially know any of the grantees that we've given awards to in the past, and if you can have a quick chat to them about their experience. Always find it helpful to learn from others who've been through the process. As we've discussed, we've introduced funding for public engagement. Have a think about who your audiences are. Both your existing audience, who hopefully you know the people who are coming to your service, but also the potential audience. Who are the people around you, both physically and online, that might be interested in your collection, and how can you explain to us as assessors what that audience are? Is it worthwhile getting demographic data? Is it worthwhile getting letters of support from audiences? What we are looking for here is creativity and ambitious engagement plans from you. Read the questions. So our question sets will be available on our website. Have a read of these before you start applying. We need some supporting documentation from you and some evidence so that we are able to make our awards to you, and you can get started preparing these well in advance. You can also bring your application to life. Our panels tend to be heritage professionals who do know what an archive is, do know what an archive's like. And you can really bring it to life by including letters of support, but also photos of your collection or other pieces of information that you think will enrich your application. Think big and small. Absolutely, we are looking for significant collections, but as I mentioned earlier, that significance can be international, it can be national, but it can also be local, telling undiscovered stories and revisiting histories that are meaningful to your community. Again, explain to us why you believe it's important, and in as much as possible, use your own voice and the voices of those who will be engaging with the collection. Be realistic. We want your aspirational projects, we want your inspired projects, but we can only fund projects that are deliverable. Make sure the project plan, your budget, your milestones, etc., are deliverable and that you believe you can achieve them with the project. And finally, as I've mentioned many a time, you're a passionate, engaged sector. You care about your collections. Show your passion. share with us why you believe your collections are important and how you believe funding will make a difference. My last slide is a set of hopefully some helpful links. Again, we'll paste this in the chat. The website for Archives Revealed, as Jack mentioned, National Archives has leadership responsibilities for the archive sector in England. There's a link to that page to find out more there. Our partners, the National Lottery Heritage Fund, have some excellent good practice guidance. So you might want to have a look over them. Pilgrim Trust and Wolfson Foundation are also very valued partners, and they have fascinating websites for you to explore. For those of us in the home nations, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Wales, I've included links to the national records offices there. And finally, I've included a link to the Archives and Records Association, which also has lots of good practice guidance and, as mentioned earlier, information about pay scales for recruiting archivists. So finally, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to our funding partners, the National Lottery Heritage Fund, the Pilgrim Trust, the Wolfson Foundation, and the National Lottery's players. I'd like to say thank you to the archives and the heritage sector. It is for you, but by you, that we are able to do this project. It is only through the excellence of your organizations and your collections that we've been able to propose and make this happen. So I really wanted to thank you, not only for that, but also for your time today.